Derek left me out in the rain like I was trash. He closed the car door slowly, so slowly it felt like he was choosing even the sound of the guilt he didn't want to feel. I stood there on the sidewalk, water pouring over me, my hair plastered to my face, my clothes heavy against my skin, while his car pulled away as if I were a problem he had finally thrown out. The window was fogged up, but I saw it. I saw him look at me through the rearview mirror. And it wasn't regret. It wasn't impulse. It wasn't a moment of, I lost my temper. It was a cold, calculated look, one that tested how far he could go. And in that split second before he turned the corner, I understood. This wasn't a breakdown. It was a performance, a scene designed to belittle me, to break me, to teach me a lesson he thought I needed. The wind stung my face, but the real ache came from realizing the loneliness didn't start there. That moment, so visible, so undeniable, only exposed what I had been living with for years. I had been abandoned every day at home, on the couch, in bed, in conversations he refused to have, in all the "we'll talk later," in the "you make everything complicated," in his silences that screamed louder than any argument. My body trembled, but it wasn't just the cold. It was the shock of finally reaching the point where I couldn't defend that man, not even inside my own head. I had always found excuses. He's tired, he's just like that, he had a rough childhood, he's not expressive. But that night, under the rain, those excuses washed off me along with the water, sliding down my face as if God himself were rinsing away the last layer of lies I used to protect Derek from who he truly was. I didn't cry right away. I slipped into a strange state, frozen and alert at the same time. You know when your body is freezing, but your mind is perfectly clear? That's what it felt like. Every drop that hit my skin woke up a memory. The time he made me apologize for something he said. The time he called me dramatic in front of his friends. The time he turned his face when I tried to kiss him, then told me I was too needy. The rain spun those scenes in circles inside my mind, as if whispering, "Look closely. This was never healthy love." I could have walked away. I could have called a cab, a friend, anyone. But for a few seconds, I just stood there because I needed to feel the full weight of that humiliation. I needed to face exactly where my life had landed. Me, a grown woman with a story, with a heart, with so much to offer, standing in the street, soaked because the man who vowed to love me decided I needed to be punished. Then headlights appeared behind me, cutting through the darkness. The car slowed, stopped beside me. The passenger door opened, and I heard the voice that had been my safe place since childhood. "Monique, get in, honey." It was Miss Loretta, my grandmother, the one person who always saw in me what I kept forgetting. The smell of her car, sweet, familiar, old-fashioned, the warmth from the heater, it all made me want to collapse right there. But she didn't rush toward me. She didn't smother me with questions. She didn't demand, "What did you do?" or "What happened?" She simply draped her coat over my shoulders with the gentleness of someone covering an open wound. When I climbed inside, the sound of the rain softened. I could hear my heart pounding, uneven, too fast. She looked at me with those deep, story-filled eyes, and in them I saw something I had never seen so clearly before. Recognition. She didn't look shocked. She looked sad and very, very aware. She turned the key but didn't drive off immediately. She let the car idle for a few seconds, breathing as if she were gathering something inside herself before speaking. I opened my mouth to explain, to justify, to defend something, anything, but she raised her hand gently, asking for silence. "Monique," she said, her voice low, steady, carrying the weight of something old. "Burn it all down." For a second, I swear I thought I misheard her. Those words felt too big for such a short sentence. Burn it all down? I stared at her, confused, tears mixing with the rainwater still sliding down my face. "Grandma, what are you saying?"
She didn't answer right away. She looked out through the rain-streaked windshield, then back at me with an intensity that made my chest hurt. Burn down everything inside you that makes you believe you deserved what he did tonight. All of it, inside and out. Her words slid into me like a key turning in a lock I didn't even realize had been there all along. It wasn't about destroying the house. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about doing to Derek what he did to me. It was about something deeper, an inner demolition of the version of me that stood in the rain and still wondered if it was her fault. In that warm car, with the storm muffled outside, I understood. The scene Derek staged to humiliate me would be the same scene that marked the beginning of the end of his power. The humiliation he planned was about to become the birthplace of my courage. I took a deep breath. I could still taste rainwater on my lips. "I don't know if I can," I whispered. Miss Loretta squeezed my hand, firm, steady, strong enough to carry my fear. "You already started, Monique. He left you in the rain. You got in my car. Sometimes courage is just one small step after someone throws you into the storm." And sitting there, drenched on the outside, beginning to dry on the inside, I understood that something far bigger than my marriage had been tested that night. It was my soul, and I would never again let anyone decide whether I belonged inside or out in the cold. When Miss Loretta started driving, my palms were still cold, even with the heater on. The warmth in the car couldn't reach the part of me that was broken. Water ran from my hair, tracing lines down my neck and soaking into the coat she'd laid over my shoulders. And yet, in spite of all that, I felt held. For the first time that night, I didn't feel alone. She didn't say anything at first. She just drove. The way she held the steering wheel had always fascinated me. Steady, careful, but never scared. I grew up watching those hands. Hands that built, provided, wiped tears, carried the world when no one else would. Hands I always wanted to have, but never felt worthy of. And now, here they were, saving me all over again. "Monique," she said, eyes on the road, "you know this didn't start tonight." Her voice didn't shake. Mine, inside my head, was shaking all over. I opened my mouth, ready to launch into the usual automatic defense I always used when someone mentioned Derek. I was about to say, "He was just upset. He's not really like that. I messed up too." But when I turned and met her eyes, all those excuses died before they were born. She wasn't looking at me with judgment. She was looking at me with recognition, like someone who knows that dark road, not because she's read about it, but because she's walked it, alone. My throat tightened. "Grandma," I said, "he left me on the street. I couldn't finish. The scene replayed in my mind in one solid piece. Derek closing the door, my face reflected in the rearview mirror, the rain hitting me like it was trying to shake me awake. She touched my hand again, not to soothe the pain away, but to anchor me to the present, to keep me from running from myself. "Baby," she murmured, "a man who leaves you in the rain has been leaving you long before that." The truth of that line hit me like it had been waiting years to be spoken out loud. And it was right there, in that warm car, watching headlights slice through the night, that I realized how used to abandonment I'd become. Not physical abandonment, that was new, loud, obvious. I'm talking about the emotional kind Derek fed me in small, constant doses. He'd been pulling away from me so quietly, I thought it was normal. I had been shrinking so carefully, it felt voluntary. He treated me like an option, and I thanked him for including me at all. A hot tear slipped down my chin. "Monique," she went on softly, "you really think he left you in that rain because he lost it? No, he did it because he believed you'd stay right there, that you'd wait, that you'd apologize later." My chest clenched so hard it almost knocked the air out of me. Yes, she was right. Derek expected me to walk back into that house dripping wet, apologizing for, I don't even know, existing, maybe. And the worst part, she added, is you learned to carry the guilt he kept dumping on you. I turned my face toward the window. Outside, the rain was already starting to ease up, but inside me, it was still pouring. I thought about all the times he stormed out and I went after him, about all the times I cried while he stared at his phone, about all the times I begged, "Can we talk?" And he said, "Later," knowing full well that later never came. And now I was finally seeing what I refused to see. He didn't leave me just on that sidewalk. He left me alone in every conversation we never had. He left me out of every decision he made without me. He left me when I got sick and he called me weak. He left me when I smiled and he didn't notice, when I cried and he didn't care, when I needed him and he didn't show up. The rain that night just dragged into the open a very old loneliness I'd been carrying inside. Miss Loretta sighed deeply, leaning back in her seat like she was bracing herself to say something she'd kept buried for years. "Monique," she said, eyes forward, "I've seen you like this before." I frowned. "Like what?" She smoothed her hands slowly over her knees, gathering courage from her own memories. "I've seen another woman in this family left out in the rain. And I don't just mean rain from the sky, I mean the kind that pours on the inside." I turned to her, surprised. "Who, Grandma?" She hesitated, biting her lip. "Me." The word dropped between us like a silent thunderclap. I stared at my grandmother, the strong, sharp, unshakable woman, and felt a knot swell in my throat, because for the first time, I saw that her strength hadn't come pre-installed. It had been forged in pain. "Your granddaddy," she said, eyes fixed ahead, like she was seeing another time overlaid on the road. "Earl left me in the rain once, just like Derek did to you tonight." My heart pounded harder. "Why?" I asked. She drew in a long breath. "Because I said something he didn't like. That was it, just an opinion about dinner. And he decided my punishment was to stand outside and wait until he decided I was good enough to come back in." My stomach flipped. Her story was my story. My story was hers, like we were both living chapters from a book written before I was born. And I stayed out there, soaked, shivering, ashamed for something I wasn't even sure I'd done wrong. And when he finally opened that door, half an hour later, I apologized. Me, Monique, I apologized. I clapped my hand over my mouth, trying to contain the jolt that ripped through me. Then she said, "Monique, I don't ever want you apologizing to anyone for being left out in the rain. I don't want you repeating what I repeated. That's why when I saw you there, I knew it was my chance to save you from a future I know too well." She turned to me, eyes shining with unshed tears, something I had almost never seen from her. "That's why I told you to burn it all down. Don't burn your home. Don't burn your life. Burn the lie he planted inside you. The lie that says you have to accept anything just to keep from being alone." My eyes filled, but this time it wasn't just from pain. It was understanding, legacy, healing. It felt like my grandmother was handing back a piece of my story I didn't even know was missing. She took my hand gently, like she was holding a seed about to crack open. "Baby, you are not going to be the next woman in this family to disappear inside a man. I won't allow it." Her strength rushed through me like a wave of heat. And there, sitting in the car parked in front of my house, I knew, maybe for the first time in my life, that no matter how hard Derek tried, I wasn't alone. I had roots. I had history. I had a whole woman standing behind me, making sure I would not repeat her past. I squeezed her hand back. "Grandma, will you help me?" She smiled, that smile of hers that always meant promise. "Baby, that's exactly why I'm here." and together we stepped out of the car. The night was still wet, but now, inside me, something was finally starting to clear. When Grandma and I walked inside the house, it felt like I wasn't just crossing a doorway. I was crossing a boundary I didn't know I'd been standing behind my whole life. The living room looked the same as always, spotless, organized, quiet. But for the first time, I didn't see furniture. I saw a portrait of a life where I had never been the center. A life where I was always invited in, but never an owner. I dropped her coat on the first chair I saw. Any other day, I would have scrambled to hang it up, clean up, do anything to avoid making a mess. Not tonight. The sound of the water dripping onto the floor felt almost liberating, as if my body whispered, "Whoever gets bothered can deal with it. I've dealt with enough alone." Grandma stood there watching me, not the version of me that rushed to please, explain, or justify, but something else. She was watching the part of me I hadn't consulted in years. "Say it again, baby," she said, closing the door gently behind us. "What did I tell you in that car?" I swallowed. The words still echoed inside me, heavy and strangely comforting. "Burn it all down," I whispered. "And do you understand now what that all means?" she pressed, walking slowly through the room, each step drawing a new outline across the floor. I looked around. The glass coffee table he chose, the neutral couch he insisted on, the beige pillows he said were practical, the bookshelf filled with his books, his trophies, his achievements. And me? I saw how absent I was. Even in the pictures, always standing beside him, never alone, always posed like an accessory, never like a whole person. "All," I said, my voice firmer than I expected, "is everything that isn't mine, but I agreed to carry anyway." She nodded, her eyes glowing with something like pride. She picked up a framed photo of me and Derek, me smiling too hard, him giving that half smile like he was doing someone a favor. She placed the frame in my hands. "This woman right here," she said, pointing at my face in the picture, "who is she?" I hesitated. Looking at that photo didn't bring back a memory, it brought back a warning. I remembered that day, spending hours getting ready, hoping he'd notice, replacing lipstick because he didn't like the color, lowering my voice, shrinking my joy. "I thought she was me," I said, "but now she feels like a replica." She's the Monique he invented, the Monique who doesn't complain, who doesn't ask questions, who doesn't disagree. That's the version you're going to burn. She didn't mean erase my past. She meant stop worshiping the version of myself built around a man's comfort. "How do I start?" I asked. "I'm scared. Scared I'll regret it, scared of being alone, scared of doing something wrong." She cupped my face in both hands, the way she used to when I was a child. "You've been alone for a long time, baby," she said, not cruel, just true. "The difference now is that you're starting to see it. Seeing hurts, but it also frees. Burning it all down begins with dismantling what he planted in your head. And the first thing he planted was the fear of yourself." Her words sliced clean through me. I followed her into the kitchen, one of the most controlled territories in that house. She opened drawers, cabinets, ran her fingers over counters with a deliberate slowness. "Look at this place. You cooked here, cleaned here, served here, but how many times did you feel like the woman of the house rather than the help?" A sharp pain moved through me. I'd never said it out loud, but that question captured something perfectly. I always walked in scared I'd use the wrong pan, scared I'd leave a cup in the wrong spot, scared he'd say it looked messy. That's not love. That's surveillance. He turned your routines into landmines, and you called it his preferences. Burning it all down means stopping the excuses you've been making for a man who treats you like a service, not a partner. My tears finally came, but they weren't like the ones on the sidewalk. Outside, I cried because I was discarded. Here, I cried because I finally understood how much of myself I had discarded for him. Grandma didn't hush me, she didn't pat my back or distract me. She stood close, letting the moment be what it needed to be, a release. I put up with so much, I whispered between uneven breaths. I twisted myself into shapes trying to keep him happy. I thought if I just improved, he'd meet me halfway. She brought a chair closer and guided me into it. Burning it all down, she said slowly, means stopping the explanations. A man who loves you doesn't need you to shrink to fit. A man who loves you expands space. Her words landed soft but heavy. Inside me, something shifted. But what if I'm being too harsh? What if I'm throwing something away that could still be fixed? She tilted her head, choosing her words with care. Fixing only works when both people pick up tools. You spent years patching a boat he poked holes in. Don't confuse exhaustion with lack of love. You loved deeply. Now it's time to love yourself. The truth pressed into me in layers, painful, clarifying, undeniable. So, burning it all down, I said, wiping my cheeks, means burning the version of me that thinks everything is her responsibility, that accepts silence as an answer, that believes she's worth less just because someone treated her less. That's exactly it. And one more thing. She leaned in, elbows on the table. Burning it all down means accepting that what's dead needs burial. You didn't destroy your marriage tonight. Derek did, slowly, quietly. All you're destroying now is your willingness to carry the corpse. I closed my eyes, letting that truth settle. When I opened them again, something inside me felt different. Not invincible, but steady. Not fiery, but clear. I don't want to be the woman he invented anymore. Grandma smiled, a small, relieved smile, like a door had finally opened. Then, baby, we start dismantling now. In here first, then out there. And in that moment, I realized that burn it all down wasn't a threat. It was an invitation, a doorway back to myself. When Grandma and I stepped through the door, the house felt smaller than I remembered. Not physically, emotionally. It was as if every wall had shrunk a few inches, squeezing the air, forcing me to finally see what had been there all along. Water from my hair slid down the back of my neck, cold against my skin, but I didn't move to wipe it away. I let it fall, let it stain the floor. It felt symbolic somehow. The house was finally receiving the first drops of the woman who had returned to herself. The living room light was on, casting perfect shadows over perfectly arranged furniture. He had chosen every piece: the glass coffee table that always felt too cold, the beige rug that stained easily, and he used that to scold me. Be careful what you spill, Monique. The neutral pillows, he said, were universal. And the saddest part? I used to think it was attractive that he had such strong opinions, all while hiding mine inside a quiet box in my chest. When I closed the door behind me, I felt like I wasn't just entering, I was intruding on a stage where I had never been allowed the lead role. A play where I'd been cast as an extra in his life. Grandma took 2 steps forward, looked around, and exhaled deeply. This house speaks a whole lot more about Derek than about you. I didn't answer. I just looked around and, for the first time, truly saw the emptiness. Not the lack of objects, my lack in all of them. I wasn't in that house. I had never been. Her coat slipped off my shoulders and landed on the chair. I didn't pick it up. In the past, I'd have rushed to fold it, place it neatly, avoid Derek's subtle frown. But the sound of it hitting the chair felt like a tiny rebellion. Do you see this? Grandma said as she walked over to the dining table. She picked up a drawer organizer, one Derek had insisted I keep perfectly arranged to avoid irritating him. That object hit me in the chest. So many corrections, so many micro-criticisms, so many moments where he watched me like I was an understudy who kept getting the choreography wrong. She placed the organizer on the table with a firm thud. This isn't organization. This is control. I moved toward it and touched the smooth plastic. Memories surfaced instantly. Why is this out of place? You don't know how to fold correctly? I already told you how I like it. Always guiding, always teaching, always correcting. And me, a model student, shrinking myself into the tight shape of whatever kept him satisfied. "Look at this," she said as she opened a drawer from the shelf. Inside were old photos of him. Not us, not moments we'd built. Him, as a child, in the college basketball team he was in, the band he'd been in for 2 years. Trophy after trophy, memory after memory. And me? Nowhere. That whole house is a shrine to him, and you are the offering. Her words landed like both ice and fire. Cold truth, burning clarity. I walked down the hallway and touched the framed pictures. Him with friends, him on trips he took alone, certificates he earned. Not a single photo of us. I wasn't part of his story. I was his background. "I tried to hang a picture of us once," I murmured. He said it looked too casual, that it ruined the aesthetic. Grandma stepped beside me, her presence solid as a pillar. "And you believed him," she said, "because you wanted peace, because women like you were taught that a peaceful house matters more than a whole soul." Her words sliced me open and stitched me back together all at once. I walked following her into the kitchen, even without him there. His presence clung to everything. Labeled jars, pans arranged by size, the refrigerator list ending with, "Don't forget what I like." I touched one of the jars. My hand shook, not from fear, but from memory. I complained when I cooked the way I wanted, said I made a mess, said I didn't have method. Grandma leaned against the counter like she was reading a crime scene. "Derek trained you," she said. "And the worst part isn't that he did it. The worst part is you believed you needed the training." That sentence cracked something inside me. "I thought that was love," I whispered. "I thought improving myself for him showed I cared." She turned to me, her eyes soft but unwavering. "Love doesn't require avoiding punishment. Love requires safety." Those words hit me, sharp and true. Suddenly, without warning, the memory of the rain poured back into me. Standing in the street, watching his car drive away, realizing the symbolism I had missed for years. In our marriage, I had always been outside waiting for him to open the door. "Grandma," I murmured, "why did he do that to me?" She inhaled slowly, deeply, like she was preparing to speak a truth people avoid naming. Because men like Derek confuse obedience with love, and when a woman starts waking up, they push, they test, they punish. He wanted you to believe that without him, you'd be exactly where you were tonight, soaked, humiliated, alone. My heart dropped, not in weakness, in recognition. So, burning it all down starts here? In the place where I never belonged to myself? She smiled a small, steady smile. "Yes, baby, and burning it all down isn't smashing objects. It's smashing silent agreements. It's breaking rules he wrote and you followed. It's dismantling the version of you that dimmed herself so he could shine." I looked around the kitchen. Every object felt like it was staring back at me, loaded with a story I never told. Inside me, something stirred, not loud, not dramatic, a quiet, deep courage, the kind born in a woman who realizes she's done dying inch by inch. "I'm ready," I whispered. Grandma nodded. "We start now." Sitting at the kitchen table, under that warm yellow light casting long shadows on the walls, I felt something strange, like it was the first time I had ever truly been in that room. For years, I had moved through this house on autopilot, cooking, cleaning, serving, fixing, smoothing every corner of his world. But I had never sat down to look, really look, at the life I was living inside it. Grandma placed an empty folder in front of me, along with a pad of paper and a pen. It looked simple, almost ordinary, but I knew it wasn't. "Now we're going to make an inventory," she said, pulling up a chair beside me, not across from me like an interrogator, but next to me, like someone walking step for step at my side. Not of furniture, not bills, an inventory of everything you endured in silence. My heart tightened. The idea of listing all the things Derek had done felt too heavy, terrifying even. Part of me didn't want proof. Proof meant I hadn't imagined it. Proof meant I wasn't dramatic or too sensitive or exaggerating. Labels he used so often they had become the wallpaper of my thoughts. "Grandma, isn't this a little much?" I whispered. "Writing it all down, it feels like I'm building a case against him." "You're not writing against him," she corrected, gently but firmly. "You're writing for you. The only person threatened by this list isn't you, Monique. It's him." Her words cracked something open inside my chest. She nudged the pad closer. "Tell me this," she said. "When was the first time he made you feel small? Not the first argument, the first time you felt less." I closed my eyes. The memories surfaced instantly, as if it had been waiting for permission to come out. "First year of our marriage," I said slowly. "He had just been promoted. I made a surprise dinner, his favorite meal, wine, candles, the whole thing. I was excited. I wanted to celebrate him. I remembered the smell of the sauce, the soft tablecloth I'd chosen, the candle glowing, and I remembered the exact look on his face when he walked in. He said, "You did all this for a promotion? Monique, that's too much. You embarrass me with all this drama." My voice cracked a little. I laughed, but inside, something cracked. Grandma nodded. "Write it," she said. "First entry. He turned your affection into exaggeration." My hand trembled as I wrote. But I wrote. And as the pen moved, the scene sharpened. The pain sharpened too, but so did my clarity. "Another one," she said softly. "A moment when he attacked something that was you, not just something you did." I didn't hesitate. "When I cut my hair short," I said. "I loved it. I felt like myself. I walked into the house expecting him to smile or at least notice I was happy. But he said, 'You should have asked me first. I liked your old hair. Now you'll have to wait till it grows back. This doesn't suit you.' A hot sting pricked my eyes. After that day, I stopped making changes without imagining his opinion first. I started dressing, choosing, buying for him. "Write it," Grandma said. I did, and each word felt like pulling a stone out of my chest. "Tell me more," she prompted. And then they came. One memory, then another, then another. "The time I had a fever," I said, voice cracking. "I asked him to get me water. He said, 'You have to learn to be less dependent.' I got up anyway, dizzy, shivering, and still apologized for bothering him." I wrote. "The time I lost my job. I came home devastated. He said, 'You should have seen this coming. Now you'll have to hustle.' And he went back to his phone." I wrote. "The photography class I wanted to take. He called it a waste of time, said I was always trying to invent a new hobby. I quit before I even enrolled." I wrote. With each line, my breathing grew uneven. But something else was happening too, something stronger. With each memory, each word, each truth written out, I felt myself rising a little. Grandma listened closely, her silence a steady container for everything spilling out of me. After a while, she placed a hand on mine. "You see something, baby?" she asked gently. "Almost nothing on that list is yelling or slamming doors. No big blowouts. It's all small things, comments, jokes, quiet cuts. But look at the effect. It shaped your whole life. That's what they call normalization of humiliation. He trained you out of expecting respect." The term punched the air out of me. Normalization of humiliation. Yes, that was it. He lowered the bar so slowly, I thought it was the natural height. You came into that marriage whole, full of joy, full of hope. And instead of protecting that, he sanded you down, little by little, until smooth felt safer than having edges. Hot tears rolled down my face. Grief, fury, awakening all at once. "I feel ashamed," I whispered. "Ashamed that I stayed. Ashamed I didn't see it sooner." Grandma took both my hands, tight, grounding. "Don't you ever feel shame for loving. Shame belongs to the one who used that love to gain power. You weren't weak, you were loyal to the wrong person." I swallowed hard, staring at the list, my proof, my history. "And now?" I asked. "What do I do with all this?" She let out a long breath. "You keep it. This is your truth. When fear shows up, when he comes with apologies or anger, when you start missing the good crumbs, open this, read it. Remember that the ending didn't start tonight. You've just finally stepped away from the funeral." I looked at the pages one more time before closing the folder. For the first time in a long time, I felt something like respect for myself. I had finally named the things I survived. And anything with a name has shape. Anything with a shape can be removed. Burning it all down means burning the silence that protected his version of our story. I didn't know what the next step was yet, but I knew this. After writing that inventory, I would never see Derek the same way. And somewhere deep inside, something in me was preparing for the moment he would walk through that door, with no idea who he was about to meet. I was still holding the folder with my inventory when I realized Grandma Loretta had gone quiet. Not her usual quiet, the wise, steady kind that feels like a blanket. This was deeper, heavier, a silence that had weight, a silence made of memories stored in places she rarely touched. She pulled a chair closer and sat down slowly, like she was preparing her body and spirit for something she knew would hurt to speak out loud. "Monique," she said, "do you think I know all this because I read it somewhere? Because I guessed? Because I have life experience?" She shook her head. "I know it because I've been you." Those words hit me like a clean, sharp cut. I stared at her, my grandmother, this pillar of strength, this unshakable woman who always seemed made of backbone and wisdom, and I felt the ground shift under me. I never imagined she had lived anything like what I was going through. Never imagined that the strongest woman I knew had once been breakable too. She folded her hands in her lap and stared toward the kitchen door, though it was clear she wasn't looking at that door. She was looking through time. I was 23, young, hopeful, thinking the world could be shaped by my effort. And Earl, your grandfather, was handsome, charming, smooth-talking. Everyone loved him. I loved him so much I didn't see how early I began bending myself to fit him. She paused, inhaling slowly, as if the air itself had memory. "What Derek did to you tonight?" She turned her eyes to mine. "Your grandfather did to me, too." My stomach twisted, my throat closed. "How?" I whispered. She rested her elbows on the table, weaving her fingers together. "I said something he didn't like, something small, a comment about a dinner we were planning. No argument, no tension, just me speaking. And he looked at me with the same cold calculation Derek used on you. Then he said, 'If that's how you want to talk to me, you can wait outside until you learn respect.' My blood ran cold. He pushed me onto the porch," she continued, voice trembling just slightly, "and shut the door. It wasn't raining at first, but a few minutes later it started, light at first, then steady, cold." She looked down at her hands, as if remembering the sensation of rain on them. I stood there shivering, waiting, hoping he'd realized he'd gone too far, hoping he'd open the door, hoping he'd choose me. Her lips tightened. He left me out there for 30 minutes. My heart cracked wide open. Not just for me, for her, for all the women who came before us. And when he finally opened the door, she said, he didn't apologize. He looked me up and down, soaked, shaking, and said, "See, now you'll think twice before talking back." The room felt still. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. "Grandma," I whispered, pain threading through every word. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" She gave a small, sorrowful smile. "Because I hadn't made peace with that part of my past. I left that marriage, Monique, but I left it late, with wounds inside me that took years to heal. And I wanted to protect you from all this. I thought you would choose better than I did." She swallowed hard. "But when you started calling me, saying, 'I'm tired,' when your voice kept breaking, when you repeated the same lines I once said myself, maybe I'm exaggerating, maybe I'm too sensitive. He was just stressed." My heart stopped. I recognized every one of those excuses. I created half of them. A tear finally escaped her eye, the first I had ever seen from her. "And when I saw you in the rain tonight, standing there in the cold exactly like I did decades ago, Monique, I swear on everything holy, I felt like I was looking at my own past, the past I couldn't save myself from, and I understood this was my chance to save you." My eyes flooded instantly. "When I stopped that car and saw you standing there, I made a promise." She held my hand. "I promised you would not apologize like I did. You would not walk back into that house with your head bowed. You would not carry the shame I carried." I couldn't speak. Emotion clogged my chest, tight and burning. "That's why I told you to destroy everything," she whispered. "Because I wasn't just speaking to my granddaughter, I was speaking to the 23-year-old woman inside me who thought she deserved the rain." A sob escaped me, raw, painful, real. "Destroy everything that makes you believe love is something you earn through suffering," she said, cupping my face. "Destroy every lie he planted in your head. Destroy every version of yourself that learned to shrink. And please, baby, destroy this cycle before it destroys you." I leaned forward until our foreheads touched, holding her hand like a lifeline. It was more than comfort. It was lineage, survival, inheritance, healing reaching across generations. "Do you know the difference between you and me?" she asked softly. I shook my head. "I took years to understand no man has the right to leave me in the rain. You understood it tonight." Her tear fell onto my wrist, warm, heavy, sacred. "You're not repeating my story, Monique. You're ending it." I inhaled slowly. The air felt clearer, cleaner, like I was breathing with lungs that finally belonged to me. She wiped my tears gently. "And now," she said, looking toward the door, "you're ready for when he comes back. And trust me, he will. Men like Derek don't know how to lose control quietly." I looked at the front door, and for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt grounding. I felt the roots of every woman before me anchoring me to the floor. No one was ever going to put me out in the rain again.
The house was too quiet when Derek's key turned in the lock. Not the kind of quiet that feels peaceful, the kind that feels alert, like the air itself is waiting to see what happens next. Grandma and I were in the kitchen, side by side. The folder, the inventory of humiliations, sat open on the table between us. A silent witness, a mirror he would not be able to distort. When the door opened, I didn't move. I didn't fix my hair, didn't straighten my clothes, didn't soften my expression, didn't step forward the way I always had to cushion his mood. For the first time in our marriage, I stayed exactly where I was.
Derek stepped inside slowly, scanning the room as if he could feel the shift but couldn't locate the source. His eyes landed on my small suitcase by the door, packed, standing upright like a quiet declaration. He saw Grandma's coat draped over a chair. His gaze sharpened. Signs, signals, a choreography he could no longer direct. "Monique," he called out, trying to sound calm. "We need to talk." Amazing how he could change tones for an audience. With Grandma present, he put on his reasonable man voice, the one that made him sound composed, logical, misunderstood. But beneath the smoothness, there was a tightness in his throat, a flicker of fear. "Good evening, Derek," Grandma replied before I could speak, arms crossed over her chest. He froze. He hadn't expected that. Mrs. Loretta?" He straightened his posture. "I didn't know you were visiting." She curled her mouth into the kind of small, unimpressed smile only grandmothers can give. "Oh, I'm not visiting. I'm here to pick up what belongs to me." And she placed her hand on my shoulder. He blinked, taken off guard, clearly recalculating. He took a step toward us. "Monique," he said carefully, "you got out of the car upset. I just wanted to give you space to think. I never meant for you to stay out there in the rain." Shame and anger swirled inside me, not because of what he said, but because I recognized the lines. I had heard them all before, and I had believed them. "You didn't give me space," I said, voice steady. "You left me on the street." He lifted his eyebrows, adopting that tone he used when he wanted to discredit my emotions without raising his voice. "Monique, you're misinterpreting things again. You always do that. You exaggerate." Grandma let out a low, disbelieving laugh. "Well, look at that," she said. "She hasn't even asked for an apology yet, and you're already placing the blame back on her." He ignored her, something he used to do whenever he wanted control of the room. He moved closer to the table, but froze when he saw the folder, the open pages, my handwriting, the timeline of everything he thought he'd erased. His face paled. "Monique, what is all this?" he breathed. "The truth, written down so I can finally see it." His jaw tightened. "This isn't fair," he snapped. "This doesn't show who I am. You wrote down only the times I messed up." "Because you didn't give me much to write on the other side," I answered calmly. He swallowed hard. His eyes flicked from me to Grandma to the suitcase to the folder. Every exit was blocked, every tactic exposed. "I'm concerned about you, honestly. You're thinking irrationally. You hold on to things too long. You take things too personally. But the words, shaped for years to pierce me, fell flat. That's what healing does. It turns weapons into noise. Grandma stepped forward, standing between me and him, not as a shield, but as a warning. "Are you worried she needs help, or are you worried she finally found help that isn't you?" For the first time, he had no instant rebuttal. Grandma turned to me. "Speak, Monique. You decide what happens next." My heart thudded, not from fear, but from truth rising. I stood, slowly. Each inch felt like breaking a chain. "Derek, I'm not here to fight. I'm not here to beg or negotiate. I'm just here to say what's real." His gaze locked on mine. I could feel him bracing himself. "I'm tired, exhausted. I spent years trying to be the woman you wanted, and the harder I tried, the more invisible I became. You didn't leave me in the rain today. You left me in the rain in every silence, every dismissal, every "you're exaggerating." And my voice wavered but didn't break. I believed it was my fault. He stepped closer quickly, alarmed. "Monique, don't do this. This is crazy. We've been together for years." "Years are not proof," I answered calmly. "Not when all the weight was on one side." For the first time since I'd known him, I saw something raw in his eyes. Not love, not remorse. Panic. The panic of losing control. "You're leaving me?" he asked, cracking. I didn't answer right away. I let silence speak. A silence that wasn't fear, but ownership. "I'm leaving," I said softly. "Not you. Me. I'm leaving myself. And I'm going back to her." His face fell apart. The composure drained. The performance collapsed. Grandma placed her hand in mine, solid, warm, certain. "She won't be standing in the rain for you anymore." That sentence closed a door he would never reopen. Derek dropped into a chair, stunned, lost, small. "Monique, please," he whispered. "We can fix this. I'll change. I'll try, I swear." I stepped back, not from fear, out of clarity. "Derek, you always knew how to hurt me, but you never learned how to care for me. And I'm done living in a house where only one person gets to be whole." He covered his face with his hands, and in that moment, I saw the truth. He wasn't mourning me, he was mourning the version of me that obeyed. The house that was always his was no longer his, because its woman, the one who had been shrinking for years, was finally expanding.
When the door finally closed behind me and Grandma Loretta, I felt something strange. Like I wasn't just leaving a marriage behind, but shedding an entire version of. The air outside was still damp from the rain, carrying that clean, earthy smell of washed pavement. A few drops fell from the trees above, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like the sky was crying on me. The real storm had stayed inside that house. Not the weather, the life I used to live there. My suitcase felt lighter than it had any right to be. Not because I packed little, but because for the first time, I wasn't carrying the weight of what wasn't mine. I wasn't carrying his expectations. I wasn't carrying his silence. I wasn't carrying the blame he trained me to swallow. I wasn't carrying the woman I had to become in order to survive him. I left all of that inside, with the lined-up furniture and spotless drawers and perfection that always cost me pieces of myself. Walking down the steps, I felt fear, yes, but it wasn't the old kind. Not the fear of doing something wrong, not the fear of being punished, not the fear of losing him. It was the fear of stepping into a life I hadn't met yet. The kind of fear that moves you forward, not the kind that keeps you stuck. We got into Grandma's car, same seat as a few hours before, but a completely different woman sat in it now. I wasn't the woman trembling because she'd been left in the rain. I was the woman who chose not to stay. Grandma started the car but didn't pull away right away. She studied me for a moment, really studied me, checking if I was present not just physically, but in spirit. "How do you feel?" she asked. I could have lied, said strong or relieved or fine. But tonight had taught me something important. I didn't need to pretend anymore. "I feel tired," I said honestly, but a different kind of tired. Like I've been carrying something heavy for years, and now that I finally dropped it, my body doesn't know what to do. She nodded slowly, her eyes soft, in a way that never felt like pity, only respect. "That's your body realizing you survived. You walked out with your spirit bruised, but intact." I turned to the window. Streetlights reflected in the puddles outside, fractured gold on dark water. I thought of all the things I left behind in that house. The quiet dinners where I swallowed the silence, the nights I cried facing the wall so he wouldn't see, the times I wondered if maybe I was truly hard to love, the times I apologized for simply existing with feelings. I felt grief for that version of me. Yes, grief, because even though she lived inside pain, she was still me, and she had carried so much, endured so much, held on for so long. "Thank you," I whispered inside my own mind. "You got me here. You can rest now." Grandma pulled into her driveway. I carried my suitcase inside her home,
Smaller, older, simpler. But for the first time in years, I felt safe. Not safe like a fairy tale, safe like a worn quilt, like worn hardwood beneath bare feet, like truth that doesn't cut you, like a home with no performance inside it. That night, lying on the guest bed, I stared at the ceiling and let the tears come. But this time, they weren't, "Why did he do this to me?" They were, "Why did I believe I deserved so little?" And instead of guilt swallowing me, a new voice rose, quiet but steady. You were doing the best you knew how to do. And now, you know better. Sleep came slowly, sinking into me like a gentle tide. But when it arrived, it came without fear. No listening for footsteps, no bracing for silence as punishment, no shrinking to avoid displeasing someone. I slept alone, and it was the fullest night of rest I had in years. Now, to you, the woman listening to the story. Maybe you're still inside your version of that house. Maybe you've just stepped out into your metaphorical rain. Maybe you're wondering if the pain is your fault, if you're asking for too much, if your voice is too loud, too soft, too inconvenient. So let me say this plainly, woman to woman, heart to heart. There is nothing unreasonable about wanting to be treated with respect. There is nothing dramatic about hurting when you're ignored. There is nothing wrong with wanting love that doesn't shrink you. What's wrong is believing you deserve less than the basics. Destroy everything didn't mean burning down my life. It meant burning down the lie inside me that said love is something you earn by disappearing. Grandma told me something that I now carry like a necklace around my ribs. Baby, don't fear being alone. Fear going back to where you were never loved. Tonight, I understand the weight of that truth. The loneliest place I ever lived was next to someone who made me feel invisible. And the most crowded place I've ever been was the moment I chose myself. If any part of this story touched a wound in you, if your eyes burned, if your breath caught, if your heart whispered, "This is me," then let this be your sign. You are not crazy. You are not weak. You are not asking for too much. You are exhausted from carrying what was never yours. When the day comes, and it will, when you feel that deep ache in your chest that says, "I can't do this anymore," remember me standing on that sidewalk in the rain, thinking it was the end when it was actually the beginning. And if this story held your hand tonight, if it made you feel seen, heard, or less alone, then leave a like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, when were you left out in the rain? Your voice matters here. And even if no one told you today, you deserve to live in a place where you never have to prove you're worthy of shelter.